to episode 5 of So What's New in the Biscuit Tin.
Hello, it is lovely to be back. I'm Jess.
I'm Sarah.
And today we have a very special guest with us. We have Sarah Laws from My Handmade Wardrobe Patterns. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
We are so excited to have you. I've collaborated with Sarah before and My Handmade Wardrobe Patterns. They are stunning patterns. They're brilliant. But Sarah also is here today to talk a little bit more about sewing patterns more generally, pattern drafting, some of those fit techniques, and maybe if we have time, as you know, we chat a little bit too much, but if we have time, we'd love to have a bit more of a chat as well about those indie patterns, those big four patterns, and sort of some of the common questions that come up. And then we will round off with a dilemma, and I've got a few fantastic ones queued up.
Nice.
Perfect. So
before we start, Sarah, we always like to ask people what biscuit they are. Do you want to go first, or would you like us to go first? Are you ready for the question?
Well, this is a really tricky one. I would say, what are those tins of the selection boxes? Is it Family Circle?
Yes.
Family Circle, because I literally wear 100 different hats. And I love it like that. The variety is definitely the spice of life. So if I was a biscuit, it would be a biscuit within that family circle.
So depending on what hour of the day it is to which biscuit within the tin
absolutely.
you are.
And it does depend what hour of the day it is, depending on what biscuit I'm eating as well, because I am very much a biscuit fiend.
And you always have a place in this podcast. Sam and I are recording in the same room today, and I was going to buy biscuits and I forgot. So I'm really sorry.
I'm still waiting for a Cornish fairy. I've never had one.
Oh, well, come over. We'll record in person again, and I will bake you some.
Do you even know what a Cornish fairy is, Sarah? Because I didn't. Just said.
You know what I do? I think, is it like a shortbread kind of thing?
It's like a gingery. Yeah, it's sort of shortbread, sort of cracked and ginger, and it's like
yes, no, I do. I know about it from Bake Off. Yes, I think they had to make them once. I can't remember what series it was, but
let's find that now. Because when Jess said that, I was like, yes, I can see it, but I can't picture what the biscuit looks like.
They are. So my grandma made them all through my childhood. We used to make them with her, but it's proper November bonfire night vibes for me. Are coming back with the dogs, and they're there and warm and they're
perfect.
I will bring them.
Are you Cornish fairing it today, or are you a different biscuit today?
Do you know what? I think today that I am a Kit Kat, because yesterday I tried to give blood, and I emphasize tried because I was like, right, I'm going to do it. I have massive veins. My blood test takes seconds. So I was like, no problem. I didn't eat enough before I took my blood test. Right. So a couple of minutes in, they were like, oh no. And I was like, everything's gone a bit grey. And they're like, we're going to tip you backwards. And I had about 7 Kit Kats. And then I was like, so you sort of spiritually and emotionally still a Kit Kat.
Still mainline the Kit Kats.
I am going to do it again in the summer. But I'm under strict instructions to have lunch before I go.
So you've broken your Kit Kat rule. You don't need to have them on a train.
Yeah, I was like, I think it's times of duress, maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
You might need an emergency break glass with a Kit Kat behind it.
I do,
yeah.
Can I tell you my personal relationship with Kit Kat? So Kit Kat Chunkies in particular. When I was working at Debenhams, I used to work ridiculous hours, and it's something that I've been talking to a friend about this week. It's just why did I put in so many hours? But I used to just literally survive on Kit Kat Chunkies, because that was the only thing that would ever come out of the vending machine. You'd put the money in and you'd press your numbers, and it would always be a Kit Kat Chunky, no matter what you went for. So during that part of my life, my 20s,
Kit Kat Chunky for me.
Yes, I was 90% Kit Kat Chunky. So I feel you, Jess.
What I really want to know is, how long did it take you to be able to eat them again after that job?
A long time, trust me, a long time.
What biscuit are you, Sam?
I think I'm back to being a chocolate chip today.
Yeah,
that's my general comfort zone level of biscuit that I am. Is just a classic Maryland chocolate chip. Soft bits, squish bits, hard bits.
That's fair. I think that's cool. And also, before we get onto everything, what's everyone sewing at the moment?
What are you up to, Sarah?
Well, I am not sewing anything big at the moment, but I'm doing lots of fixes. Ooh. So I've just started something which I'm naming Fix It Friday. Every Friday I pop onto Instagram for about half an hour and just fix something live and chat. Just, bit of back and forth, a few people asking questions and things like that, but mainly just me driveling on about what I've been doing during the week.
I love those videos
things
though.
I'm doing. Yeah, and it's been really good for me because I'm not doing so much sewing at the moment because I've just got this new job that I'm working on. And it's very heavily computer based, and just to have that like every week, that time set to just do something really productive.
Yeah.
Because
It's like those
fixing,
isn't it, as well? Like it's getting near your sewing machine. I've done a similar video that will have come out. I'm going to try and do them more, where if I just do a Sunday sews on YouTube, I only get to talk about sewing. I don't get to do any sewing. So I've started doing a thing where I will just sew something simple that I need to sew and just talk. And it's almost real time because, as you say, you're just chatting along as you do it. But they're really fun. And you actually get to do something rather than making content.
Yes.
Fan of that.
Yeah, I think when I do the virtual socials, it's a bit like that. Because when I'm hosting those, I'm kind of sewing whilst looking after everyone, and it is quite nice. And I always pick something a bit more straightforward for that as well. So, yeah.
I mean, the first thing I made at one of your in-person socials was another funnel neck jumper.
Oh yeah,
from I'm addicted. Honestly,
I do have one of those on my list. I really need a new one because mine's so bobbly, it's ridiculous, and I'm like, this is embarrassing. I designed the pattern. I need to have a decent version of it.
And Jess, in her usual style, knocked it up really quickly.
Oh, I did.
And then she had to get fabric off the swaps table and a pattern off the swaps table to keep herself busy.
I'd never sewn in person before, and I was like, after about an hour, I was like, well, I'm done. I'm going to get another cup of tea. But would recommend, though, we'll put the pattern in the show notes.
Yeah,
it's one I was a
nice
tester
pattern.
for. Yeah. You had a go at it.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, that was an accident.
Yeah, but you do.
I did that thing, with the net where you have to have right sides together to because I was chatting at the sewing social, I did it the wrong way around. But luckily, I mostly have variegated thread on my overlocker.
Nice.
So it was this beautiful variegated like seam around this green neck. So I was like, I think I'm going to embrace it. And then everyone encouraged me to. So then I did visible seams on all of it. So
it was the best possible outcome, I think, really.
Yeah. And I kept it sleeveless, and it's a really nice, cool. Sort of like what we call in those, because tank tops make me think of t-shirt. Yeah. What do we? It is a tank top, isn't it?
Yeah.
American sweater vests.
Yeah, sweater vests. That's what I was going to say. Sweater vests.
That does. Yeah.
What are you saying at the moment?
So I have nearly finished my pogo knit pullover by Friday Pattern Company, because I've taken part in the pogo knit party that Christine organised.
Yes.
So Christine on YouTube is Gemini Stitches, and on Instagram, and she thought she'd just get some of us together to sew a pogo knit, and before she knew it, it had grown into something huge with lots of vloggers and prizes. People were like contacting her, and she's going, I can't believe this. So when this episode comes out on the 28th of February, the following day, leap year day, is the reveal of all the pogo knits. So
I'm so excited for this, because I'll be honest, I first heard of this and I was like, what in God's name is a pogo knit? Like what?
It's a mountain range.
I had to go look it up, and then I found the mountains and I was like, well, it can't be that, and then looked further and found that it looks like a gorgeous pattern. I'm excited to see everyone.
It's quite different because there's a lot of jumper patterns out there, like there's lots of other patterns, and actually it's going to make me do the welt pocket, which is on my Make 9. Someone's given me some advice about not using the super thick fabric. I'm going to use the rest on it. So it's great because it helped me tick off one of my Make 9s as well, because it'll be my first welt pocket. And also it's quite a different jumper. I think it's quite unisex as well. I don't know if we say that anymore, do we?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think you can, because the Helen's Closet pullover is deliberately a unisex pattern, because I made one for Adam.
I mean, anyone can wear anything.
Yeah,
let's be clear. I'm not genderising things, but sometimes they're advertised in a certain gender,
or they're designed to be like, they're not shaped to a bust or anything.
And this one's clearly shaped, And so there's some nice ones out there, but it's going to be lovely to see on Instagram on the 29th all of the different kinds. So
fantastic.
By the time this episode comes out, fingers firmly crossed, I will have a full toile of my wedding dress.
Exciting.
Yes. Toile fabric has arrived. So I bought my actual fabric. And I had such a great time in the Goldhawk Road, guys. And
you had a lovely time.
I had such a nice time. Then my mum sketched my dress out for me. She was like, "You got to sketch it." And I was like, "Mum, I can make, but I can't sketch." And she was like, "Everyone can sketch." And I was like, "No, you can sketch because you're a costumier, so you can sketch." But now I have a little sketch on like a piece of notebook paper, and I'm going to frame it, I think, once I'm done.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
But I have 4 meters of acetate satin as a toile fabric, which, as Sam knows, I'm allergic to toiles. So
you seriously appreciate it, making a toile of this.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't. For my sister's wedding bridesmaid's dress, I didn't make a toile because I'd already made the pattern up, but I made it in a completely different fabric and changed the skirt quite a bit. And I really wish that I had toiled it, because the weight of the skirt pulled the bodice down. It just didn't quite sit right. It gaped a little bit. You know, you're gonna. Don't be afraid of doing a toile, and perhaps a second one.
I was just going to say that, or even a second part on the bodice. Or
I think particularly for this one, I am sticking 3 patterns together.
Yes.
And I'm not going to say too much about which patterns, because once we're married, I'll release the whole vlog series of the whole thing. But the front is 1 pattern, half of the back is 1 pattern, and then I needed a pattern with a train, which is hard to find actually. But I found one with the right length as well.
Yeah.
Trains, I was like, I don't know. However, I did have a moment when I was trying on wedding dresses where the dress I love, and I'm not replicating, but I'm building upon as a style I really like. Was $2,500. And I was like, well,
of course.
You could see through the sides. You could see the seams.
Wow.
And I was like, what? $2,500, and you haven't even you could have French seamed it.
That wasn't French seamed.
No.
Oh,
and things are such a fancy shop as
that's
well.
Because most people buying them don't know those things, do they?
They should. They educate themselves.
Bless her, the girl who was doing it, obviously it was me, my sisters, my mum, and we were all under firm instructions not to mention obviously that I'm making my dress. But there was a moment where my mum was like, well, if I'd done the seams, I was like, you wouldn't have done the seams because you don't know how to sew. Shush. She got round it. I'd be like, oh, many years ago, I was, as a costume and everything. Like, what's up?
But it's funny that you should mention that kind of feeling, because I was talking to I'll hopefully get into it later, but I've just finished a retreat, pattern making retreat. And we had Deborah Drake from Sewing Bee come along as a special guest speaker in the evening. And she is a fascinating lady. You have to get her on the podcast. She's wonderful.
Is she the lady who lives in Wales?
Yes, she does. And she's really
how I think of people.
Well, she's really into Chanel. That's like her favorite designer. And we were talking about how we really want to replicate the skills and the techniques used by these high-end designers, but there's still this little bit of a fear, a little bit of a imposter syndrome that's like, I can't go in and look at the clothes, I can't get close to the actual clothes. I want to replicate Chanel, and I think if I gave myself the time and the kind of skilled myself up, I would be able to do a good job at that. But I need to just get over myself, go into a department store, pick up something that's a designer garment, and just look at the insides and see how it's thing. And I used to do that. I don't know why. I've kind of it's definitely an imposter syndrome kind of thing.
I think part of it, one of the huge reasons I wanted to go, I spent all day pretty much trying on wedding dresses, and then I went fabric shopping. We had lunch, my sisters peeled off because that was them done for bless them, they put in a shift, they don't shop the way I do, or my mum does, they don't have the stamina, but they were fantastic. They gave really good opinions. I'm so happy they were there. But as we got through, I tried on so many dresses, and I have to say, some of them I was like, I don't know where to start with this, but a lot of them I was like, oh no, I can do this, or that's not even finished, or there were moments where I was like, this actually will be fine. And I'm so happy actually I ended up liking something similar to things I've made before. But I would love to hear more about the pattern retreat side of things and events you've got coming up, because I really wanted to go to your first one in January, but it was my birthday, so I couldn't. I was trying on wedding dresses actually at that exact moment. But can you tell us a little bit more about all the fabulous events you're doing and workshops and everything?
Of course. Well, I have I wouldn't say bitten off more than I can chew this year, but I've definitely filled up my diary.
I'm with you there.
I was got to the end of January, and I was just like, wow, that's only January. I've still got the rest of the year to get through. But it's all good. I love being busy. I really do. I didn't do quite so much last year because I was working in a college, but I've now got a new job, which is working for Charm Patterns in America.
Oh, amazing.
Wow.
So fantastic company to work for. The training has been amazing.
Oh, brilliant.
Basically artworking their patterns.
Nice.
So it's a very technical job, but it allows me to then have the kind of creative side of things that I have with my handmade wardrobe and my events and my teaching and that kind of thing. So it balances really, really well, or it will do once I've got my head around it all. But before I started that job, I set out my calendar for the year, and that included the retreat, which was at Winstanley House in Leicester. And 9 ladies joined me for 2 and a bit days of pure pattern cutting. So they learned how to draft a bodice. They started off learning how to measure themselves correctly, because that is the ultimate absolute must have when it comes to pattern cutting. And then they made their bodice blocks, and we fitted them, and I showed them how to do a proper fitting, how to annotate their fitting, like make fit comments like you would in industry, and then transfer those onto the pattern. And then I was also working with a wonderful lady called Kath McBean, and I've been teaching pattern cutting with her for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years now. And she taught them how to manipulate darts,
brilliant,
to like take darts and put them into pleats, gathers, move them around the body, that kind of thing, which is basically the absolute kind of starting point for pattern design. Once you know how to do that, you can create so many different style lines and silhouettes and everything. So,
which is it's such a simple thing, and it changes so much. Like I did it was like a couple of hours workshop, so really just scratching the surface at the Knitting and Stitching Show a few years ago. And I want to say it was with the Carolyn Rose School, maybe. It was someone else, because I've still got the booklet.
It wasn't Helen Rhiannon, was it?
I don't think so. But do you know what? I was so new to the sort of sewing community at that point. All I remember is something being like, we were working at like half scale, so it was less terrifying. And actually, like, I don't know, it's just this something where you're like, oh my God, I can just put all this volume up there. Or like, it was so...
You can create the shape that you want, like that's in your head.
Wild.
What's this?
But I do think it's so empowering for people, even if they don't want to create their own patterns, to understand how much you can affect a bought pattern for your own body. Because so many people, I think, from what we read and are hearing from our podcast listeners, is the disappointment when you make something and it doesn't suit your body. But it's a bit like when I was buying shop bought clothes. Most shop bought clothes didn't fit my body either. And and at that point you blamed the shop, or when I'm a petite and they don't sell petite clothes or whatever. But I think sometimes when we start out sewing, we think, okay, we've bought a pattern, I've measured myself, I've made the size, but yet it still doesn't fit my body. But that's because our bodies are all still unique. So I think like retreats like you did, just understanding that just adjusting a dart or something can suddenly make something fit your body that it wasn't fitting, and you can make it work for you. It's huge.
Massive.
And I think for the other ladies to see each other getting fitted was really empowering as well. Because I mean, one lady said at the end, she was like, it's amazing how many different alterations we had to make, and we all needed alterations. There was one lady that the block kind of fitted just about perfectly, and she was a bit disappointed. She was like, I haven't got alterations. Help your friend.
One that doesn't fit, so I can do the adjustment.
Exactly. But they can then take those alterations that they've had to make and apply them to shop bought patterns as well. They don't have to use their block and start from scratch every time.
But if they want to, they now have the tools to do that.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about. It's about giving people the tools to then make the decisions about how far they want to go with it. They can make their own patterns from scratch, or they can just amend a pattern, hack a pattern, but they've got the confidence to do it.
Yeah, and I think it took me years to realise that every pattern company is based their pattern on a different height and different shaped body. Because it's not something that's hugely talked about. And it's the same as clothes. You know, we know, if you read anything about fashion or done any training or anything, we know that they're based on certain body types. But if you don't know that, we're still led into this, but I don't fit, rather than it not fitting me. And I think, you know, when you realise that like Seasons of East designed for like a 5'7" person,
that has 5'2" women, we suddenly have a moment of But you know what, though? So there's two things to say on this, because I've been looking at patterns recently. Vicky Sews do heights, you know, full length dresses, and it's my favourite thing, because there is a 5'1" to 5'3" height bracket.
I still struggle with their patterns though, because you're like having to commit to one. And and my body, I'm at an age in my life where my body is probably like everybody evolving. And so I find that if I'm committed to ordering one size PDF, I don't want to commit to that.
No, that's
but I do like the fact that they do the heights. There's not many pattern companies that do that.
Well, because it's a waste of fabric otherwise, I find. Like, I get a pattern, it'll say you need 3 meters. I'm like, oh, but I don't. And then I'm suddenly left with 1.5 meters of weird, you know, like, it's sort of, I wish there was, or it was in bold more of like, you know, what were those trousers I had to cut? They're a big 4 one. I had to cut 7 inches off the bottom.
Wow, that's crazy.
But also, it's like, it's not, we sometimes think, you know, I've got to cut it off the bottom, but actually, like, I really like Closet Core because they give you so many measurements to measure out to try. But even so, I had to do one first to go, oh, I should have read all that, because I'm not a big fan of reading all the waffle. But actually realizing that, you know, a pocket for a 5'7" person is very different from a 5'2" person. You know, I need to scale everything down, not just cut it off the bottom.
Yeah, definitely.
And just things like, I've had to learn to embrace doing a full bottom adjustment and loving that. It's quite otherwise, isn't it?
It's
Definitely.
so important. And are you doing more of these pattern block workshops through the year?
Yeah. So I'm teaching at Carolyn Rose School of Sewing, and then the next one is actually a bust adjustment workshop.
Nice.
So I'm making a simple sleeveless top, and I'm just going to concentrate on teaching them how to do a darted bodice adjustment and a princess seam adjustment.
When is
they do this half? That is, it will have been by the time that this podcast comes out, but I think it's the 16th of February. I think.
So I think it was a good point to say, if anyone's interested in Sarah's workshops and where she does them, do you want to tell everyone where it's easy to find them?
Of course. So it's Carolyn Rose School of Sewing in Leamington Spa. Really, really lovely place. I mean, if you've not been to Leamington, it's worth going for the day anyway, just to have a lovely time. But her sewing school is really cute. It's proper like old school haberdashery fabric shop.
Go, it's on our train line.
Yeah. Having a connection with someone that works there in our podcasts.
Oh, yeah. Sam works there, and she's absolutely wonderful. And she's
So so for people who are keen, because we're finding that a lot of people listening are really keen to take things up, do they book through Carolyn Rose?
Yes, so they book through her website. I tend to put most of my events on my website as well, on my handmade wardrobe.
We'll put in the show notes for everybody.
Yep. So I'm getting better at actually updating that and putting on what I'm actually doing rather than just doing it.
I'm with you there, though. You're just like, but I'm already doing it. Why do I have to also, can't someone else know and just update this for me?
Exactly. Can't the world just be psychic? Come on.
Your website, and I've definitely seen you on Instagram as well. Yeah. So on Instagram, if people are looking to follow you, it's My Handmade Wardrobe, isn't it?
At MHW Patterns or at My Handmade Wardrobe Patterns. Brilliant. Depends how lazy.
We'll put them in the show notes. Sometimes people just like to have a quick look while they're listening.
Exactly.
Now, I know you and Sarah collab before, but obviously I'm just getting to know you. For people who don't know, like me, how did you start out designing patterns?
Well, I studied fashion design at Westminster University, where Jess is also studying at the moment.
Very excited.
And I then got a job as a trend designer for a trend agency, which was really interesting.
Sorry, for anyone outside of the industry, what is a trend designer?
I thought you'd never ask. Well, it was actually a colour trend agency, and they pretty much like advised the industry on what color trends, what colors were going to be trending. And it was really interesting because obviously, like, you've got catwalks and you've got fashion that leads fashion, so high-end fashion leads high street fashion, but you've also got a lot of things going on in the world, like films that are coming out. When the Olympics was coming out, even the people that were sponsoring the Olympics, you know, the colors that they were associated with then became quite important in fashion and in other things.
Well, you see that this summer with summer just gone with Barbie.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Who'd have thought we'd all be wearing candy pink for like 6 months? It's like...
I mean, I'm embracing it still. But, you know. But that's so cool. I didn't know that existed as like a job.
It's a really, really interesting side of fashion, and it really played into my kind of psychology brain, because I'm fascinated about, like, why do people have the certain tastes that they have? Why do people feel connected with something 1 minute, and then like 6 months later it feels really like not their cup of tea anymore? So bit like, you know, me being a different kind of biscuit every every day or 3 times a day.
It's quite interesting about places like Pinterest are now making predictions as well, because I saw they'd made like trend predictions for the 2024. And so they were looking at, a bit like Google does, looking at like search data, pictures people were gathering. But then the predictions can become the reality just because they were the prediction.
Exactly. Like, which came first.
So that's so cool. So you started there. Were you there for a while, or was that more of like
so I was there for nearly 2 years. And then I got my dream job working in kidswear as a kidswear design assistant actually, for Gap. Which I was promptly made redundant from. They decided to close the London office.
Gap's been quite an evolution, hasn't it, in the last sort of 8 years?
Yeah, and it was a real reality check, actually, because I was so excited. Obviously, my first design job, that's what I've been leading towards, and then, you know, it wasn't, and it was a bit like, oh my goodness, you know, is this the industry that I'm going into? Wow. So then I got a job in ladies' wear. As an assistant designer for Debenhams, which was really interesting, really, really hard work, as we've discussed previously with the Kit Kats. Late night Kit Kats. But I did learn a hell of a lot. I decided that my time in London was done and dusted when I realised I was spending more time worrying about what I wasn't doing rather than enjoying the things that I was doing, because I love London, I really do, but it is serious FOMO, like, all the time, unless you decide to really be in the moment. I decided that I was going to move back to Leicester, where I'm originally from and where I am now, and I then got a job with a supplier, which again was the most interesting month in the worst way. It was terrible. Suppliers,
really?
There are some terrible suppliers out there. Yeah, really, really horrible company to work for.
So what sort of suppliers is that?
Sorry,
what sort of suppliers is that? Is that like fabrics and stuff, or is that?
So it was a when I say a supplier, I was designing for a company that then supplies a high street store or several high street stores.
Right, okay.
So a supplier would be somebody that, like, might design garments for somebody like ASOS, and then the buyers would go in and choose from a rail the designs that they want to move forward and make 10,000 of and sell for 50p or whatever. So that was, I'm really glad I did it, because it really, again, opened up my eyes to the fashion, the other side of the fashion industry. I then went to work for George and for Next.
Oh wow.
So I worked for them as kidswear designers, as a kidswear designer for each of them. And again, really interesting. I got to go to Bangladesh and see all the factories and where everything was made, and how, you know, end of things was made in a really good way, actually. George, their ethical standards were fantastic. I was really impressed.
That's so good.
That's
to know.
good to hear,
but they were definitely very high. I mean, of course, I was seeing the good side of things because it was an organised trip to show us how good things, could be. But
yes, possibly skewed slightly, but still better than expected.
Yeah. And then I was working at Next, and I started to feel really disconnected with the fashion industry through all the things that I'd seen. And I'd always been really, really excited by fashion and consumerism, like buying more and more new things all the time, got to have the latest, fashions and be on trend and everything. Mm-hmm. And I started teaching, I got a small group of people together, like a community group, to do some sewing, because when I moved back to Leicester, all my friends from university had all stayed down south mainly. I didn't really have any friends that were into sewing up in Leicester.
Okay.
Like, right, I need to create something. I can't find any groups, so I created a meetup group. And it was called Leicester's Crafty Ladies. It's still going on Facebook.
Oh, join it if you live in Leicester.
Somebody else, yeah. Exactly. It's quite sweet because it's been taken on by somebody else, and they've basically kind of the admin for it now. And occasionally I check in, I'm like, oh, that's nice.
Oh, lovely.
But yeah, I started teaching people because they. After me organising some things that we could do all together, like little embroidery group, and we did some like air dry clay and some flower arranging and stuff like that. And then people started to want to actually sew things using sewing machines. So I got a few. I'm trying to think what order it went in. I started getting groups together to do things like making pajama bottoms, which was a real eye opener. Because I seriously underestimated how much fabric everybody needed, and everybody ended up with pajama shorts instead of pajama bottoms. So that was a learning.
But, the important bit for them to learn is really the topping, the length of the neckline.
Exactly. And then, so basically I just started teaching people how to sew, and then I got my own little studio. And then in 2015, I opened a shop with my business partner, Freya.
Yes.
Crafty So-and-So. And we ran that shop until just during COVID, actually, 2019, when we moved to a studio. Mm-hmm. And everything kind of changed up after then, really. But during that time, we decided to launch a pattern range called my handmade wardrobe patterns. Sorry, Sam, finally getting to the answer to your question.
It's really so interesting. So interesting. Top quality podcast guest right here.
I'm quite old now, so I've got quite a long story. And every time I tell it, there's more. But I started my handmade wardrobe patterns just basically because I wanted a really reliable range of patterns to teach in the workshops. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to not have to be grading up on the hoof, basically. I'd have people come into classes and we'd have patterns from the big four, and they'd say that they were, up to size 18. But the reality of it was the person that came to me for the class might fit in an M&S 18, but they're going to be more like a 14 in the big four patterns.
Yeah.
So it was really frustrating, and I was just like, I need something reliable. I want to be able to teach them to sew. I don't want the first conversations to be, feeling bad about their body.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And things that they don't really want to be, they shouldn't have. That shouldn't be the first step in design, making clothes.
No, it shouldn't.
Feeling bad
and a very intimate conversation for you to have as first part of sort of teaching someone.
Yeah, definitely. And I've become better at having those conversations as well. I really do try and bring a kind of narrative of body neutrality.
Yeah.
I don't want people to come in and be like, well, I'm bigger than this person, or I have these fit issues, or I need to change this every time, or anything like that.
Because it's really about they're not issues, they're just requirements. Like,
exactly.
I need more room in the bus and less in the back. That's not a problem. It's just the shape I am.
Exactly. I have more shaping in certain areas.
Yeah, exactly. In the same way that one of my friends is 5'10" and I'm 5'2". Like, it's just how we are.
Exactly. There's no body shame in that. You know, it's not.
But there are patterns that definitely you can be a bit like. There is one pattern brand that I won't mention in which I am a size 12. But if I make the size 12, it's 3 sizes too big for me. But that's how it goes by my measurements. And then you get a bit unstuck because you go, am I the problem? What have I done?
Am I? Where am I with this? And it would put you off using a pattern brand, just the same as it puts you off going to shop in certain stores if you find that, you know, one thing that people don't realise, and I find it's a bit of an epiphany moment when people come to my classes, is how important the vertical measurements are on the body. Because if you get those wrong, I always get people to take those first.
Okay.
So if you get those wrong, then everything is going to be in the wrong place. So if you get your high neck point, so your side of your shoulder point to your bust point wrong, well, then nothing is going to sit correctly. It's all going to be kind of a bit high, a bit low, and all your measurements around the body are going to be in the wrong place. So that's my top tip to take away today is do your vertical measurements and measure the pattern as well.
Can I also ask a question about sizing generally, because you have the industry experience and you now create your own patterns? What is the sizing block for the industry?
There isn't one, and that's the big problem. Every single high street retailer has its own block, has its own set of measurements.
And River Island has been shrinking for the last 10 years.
Because fabric's getting more expensive. You know, they want to make it more I don't know.
Well, they don't want to charge more, but how do we cut costs? You know?
Exactly.
And then it's like crisps. There's less crisp in a pack now.
Shrinkflation.
That's it.
Shrinkflation.
But also, but then the fashion industry flip it by going, do you know what? Actually, you guys should just be skinnier. And then
eat less crisps and and I'm like, no, I'm eating crisps and I'm just making my own clothes, all right?
But it is, be happy. Shops, you pick up the same size and they don't. It's
even in the same shop, and that is the problem. So as I was saying about suppliers, so somewhere like Marks and Spencer's will have maybe 20 or 30, maybe more suppliers. So they have factories that they'll have an in-house design team at their head office, but they'll also have suppliers that have their own design teams. And some of the garments that they buy will be that those in their head office their buyers buy will be designed and sampled by the designers and seamstresses in the factory, so they might be using different blocks. They might have given the measurements, but they might have made their blocks completely differently.
With difference. Because it is like a huge thing. You see it in, I think we're so much more aware of it with sewing pattern companies because we're engaging with the base pattern. I'm going, oh, this doesn't work. Whereas when you try on something and you look, you go, oh, well, it doesn't really fit, but maybe it's the wrong size or whatever. You don't think about it the same way. Whereas when you're cutting it out, like someone messaged me after my slight debacle with the coat I was making, which it turns out a lot of people have. I feel so much better about this, the number of messages I've had. But someone messaged me and she was like, oh, I don't, why is the armhole, like I've cut it wrong? Why is the armhole different on this side to this side? And I was like, no, that's about make your shoulder move, so there should be more at the back because it's going further round, like it was a weird like 2-part sleeve. But when you start looking at things like that, you start going, oh, so there's a reason this is longer, or this is how it should fit. And then you look at ready to wear clothes and you're like, that's also why when I reach forward in my nice jumper, the rest of it comes with me, because
because they haven't thought about it. And unfortunately there are a lot of there's not, in England, we're a bit unfortunate. We don't have that many good pattern cutting courses and colleges that do like really, really good pattern cutting. The focus tends to be on design. Whereas
it's more glamorous, doesn't it?
If you're trained in Italy, you are learning like every single thing that you need to know meticulously, like down to the millimeter. You'd be getting, you know, your measurements correct.
It's just a different philosophy almost, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's about a cultural thing, though. You know, we live in this country in a now. So you know, design and, you know, and aspiration as a young person, we've lost that sense of kudos around being a skilled craftsperson. It's not that high. It's not like it used to be, where that was a really respected thing.
But also, I would argue we haven't put as much money into apprenticeships and things, because I did an event last year for the Heritage Craft Association, and it was launching this list of basically 100 crafts that are actually on the threat list of like, it's like as a cellist, this one and a ballerina.
Stained glass is on there, isn't it?
Stained glass is on there. Cello and violin bows are on there because it's working with horsehair and stuff. Point shoes. There's like 2 people left who can make shoes in the UK. And it goes through, and it's even like fabric spinning and stuff. But
it goes back to, I remember when I was at secondary school, there was the sudden pressure on all schools to push everyone into doing A-levels because schools got more money. And I know now, because obviously I've been on the inside of that, that's true, to push people through A-levels and then onto uni, because then your school looks good because you can give you great results, and you can say where all your levers go. So there were the move from BTECs and all of that was around push and drive for money and kudos. Shame, because, you know, going into an apprenticeship and learning a skill from a person who can pass that skill on to you. Once that skill's gone, it's gone.
Well, my dad did an apprenticeship. He was a luthier, which again, very specialised, and so that then branched out into like carpentry and all sorts of stuff. I also think there is a shortage, though, of people like yourself, Sarah, who can actually teach these classes.
Just because you can do it doesn't mean you can teach it.
Well, the Warwick College, I think it's Warwick College, is always oversubscribed on their pattern cutting course. So really? I find quite a lot of people come to the Carolyn Rose course, because it's Leamington Spa is quite close to Warwick. So we're looking at how we can kind of fill in some of those gaps for people. And that's quite exciting, because what I love about teaching at Carolyn Rose is that all the people that come, and it is quite a lot of... it's quite a wide age range, actually. They're just all really, really enthusiastic, and they've all got their own reasons for learning.
I love that.
Some want to make a block so that they can make their own dresses to fit them. Some of them have really interesting fashion ideas, and they want to kind of push that side of things. So yeah, it is. I think like doing the short courses is really, really useful. I would love to get involved with longer courses and, you know, more involved teaching. And that's kind of where I'm going with these retreats. But having worked in a college last year, it's not for me.
That's fair. I mean, the university...
I taught secondary students.
Yes, that's where I was. It was secondary school, and it's just so restrictive. It really is. Like I really had to dumb down what I was teaching, and it was such a shame. Whereas
it really depends on whether it's people who've elected to do it or whether it's just a whole class as well.
Does make a
because not far from where we are, there's BCA, which is something College of Agriculture. They are booked up for next year already on all of their apprentices, from animal care to mechanics to childcare to everything. So when you get it where people are selecting it, it's a completely different. But you're right, if you're teaching young people who are being told they've got to do it, it's no joy.
Even like I'm teaching first year university students at the moment, and they just wander around.
I do absolutely love people who want to learn later in life, because they really want to learn. You totally get like them engaged, and they're excited, and they just literally, I feel like a drained sponge. I feel like a wringed out cloth at the end of every class. I'm like, I have given you everything, every last drop.
That's amazing. That. You know what? I'm going to be on one of your next because I'm desperate.
Be out, Jess.
Honestly, seriously, like I need help with sleeves, because I'm fine. I can do a full bust stitches. I don't like doing them, but I can do them. But it's something about then adjusting arm size. Isn't going right in my brain, and I think that's the same for a lot of small backed, big boobs people. Because suddenly you've gone, oh great, I've got all this extra space, and you don't need the extra at the back. So it's suddenly
I put a lot of cheaty like back seams in that are not meant to be.
You said jersey just to avoid fitting.
Yeah, that's true. But even with jersey, when it's big and billowing at the back, you still got to fix it. So just cut it through the middle,
stick it together. What would I'm aware the time. So what would your top tips be for fitting? So we've talked about vertical measurements.
Yes.
Tips for people if they're worrying about fit of things.
So bodices start at the shoulders. So as long as you've made sure you've measured your vertical measurements, you've made any alterations that you need to do for that. When you're actually fitting your garment, start fitting at the shoulders, and always check to see if the side seam is running straight down the side of the body. If it's not, unpick it, level that up and level your shoulders, and usually you'll find that will fix a lot of your issues. But it's not something that we think of doing.
Even shoulders differ in their level of slope that they have.
Absolutely, yeah.
Realising and just knowing what kind of shape their shoulders has hugely takes the hang of everything.
I've discovered this recently. I have a much more like slope, more, I don't know, I see much more of an angle than I thought I did.
Yes.
And this has become apparent in tailoring.
We wear a lot of off the shoulder things these days. Like the jumper that I'm wearing now is off the shoulder, and that's just like we've got used to that kind of like slightly kind of more casual look. But when you wear something more fitted, it's like, oh, this isn't in the right place. There's something, or you can't tell what's off about it. Like the back flips, the back kind of hangs down, and it's cutting into your neck, and you're thinking, I don't know what's wrong. It just feels off. But usually shoulders.
It is all for me as well. I find it's the classic. I've got better at this now. When I look at something, I go, "What's wrong?" I move my arms in all directions. Suddenly, like if I'm reaching forward, and suddenly I'm like, zombie arms. Or if I'm reaching up and the whole thing's lifting by like, and I'm suddenly like, right, there's something. I need to learn actually what adjustment I need to make to stop it lifting when I reach up. Something's happening, like it's not fitting fully.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for armholes as well, like getting your armhole tight enough, because we all want to be comfortable, obviously, and we don't want armholes cutting in. But if you have your armhole too low, it does actually restrict your range of movement if your sleeve and your bust is tight as well. If it's a fitted garment,
starts pulling across the butt.
It does, yeah, and then you're suddenly like, oh, I can't move as much as I want to. So I think as women, if we want to really dress the way that, we want, we've got to be uncomfortable in some way, it seems.
Do you know what?
You've got to have your armhole cutting in.
Can I ask one final question?
Yeah, of course.
Why don't women have pockets? Is there an industrial? Pajamas have pockets. What does he need overnight to have pockets?
Well, I could do a whole podcast along with my studio friend Claire on pockets. So basically, to keep it brief, pockets are a form of rebellion originally. So women used to sew pockets into their garments during the suffragette movement, and they'd hide pamphlets and suffragette paraphernalia and things like that to share with their friends.
Oh my god,
because it would be a separate pocket, wouldn't it? It wasn't attached to the skirt.
Pockets are a feminist.
They are feminist.
I mean, I knew they were
banned during that period.
Oh my god.
So like everybody should put pockets in. Let's rebel with our pockets.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think one of the joys of being able to make your own clothes is putting as many pockets in as possible.
Definitely.
Or putting them in the right height. But also there seem to be a lot of garments. I had one recently I got quite annoyed at, where I was like, if I have to self-draft the skirt, you've not even given me space to put pocket. Like, I was like, I'm paying £17 for this pattern, and really the only bit is designed up to my hip bones, and that's it. So I was like, you could have at least gone, if you want to put pockets, this is the markings for them.
Yeah, just a bit of advice would be great.
There should always be, I think, on a pattern, even if there isn't a pocket piece, just to say, if you want to put pockets in, this is where it's
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much. I don't know time-wise if you can join us for our dilemma.
I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to go. I could talk to you guys for days, literally. And if you ever have a slot on again, I'd love to come on.
We'll be having you back. So remember to go and check out My Handmade Wardrobe Patterns and Crafty So-and-So. You can give them a follow as well. And also you can see Sarah at the Sewing for Pleasure show, where you will also see me. So more on that later.
Oh, Jess, I loved talking to Sarah. Thank you for arranging that. It was great. So there's one thing that we didn't get a chance to talk to Sarah about, which was I see in a lot of the Facebook sewing groups, I belong to a lot of like sewing beginner groups, people who have started out sewing and they've bought a big 4 pattern and it goes wrong and they struggle and then they get really disheartened. So
I fully get
anybody out there listening who's a beginner, I think Jess and I have been through that stage, haven't we?
I think so.
Yeah.
I definitely have thoughts on this, actually.
Yeah. So do you want to share your thoughts?
I do. I've been thinking about this. I never thought you wouldn't. This is the joys of this podcast. So I have 2 bits of sort of advice. One, the instructions on indie patterns are worlds, oceans better than big 4 patterns. What I would say, though, is that McCall's, for example, have a huge number of patterns and the sizing is all the same. So you will find less sizing or block consistency if you swap between indie patterns.
Yeah, definitely.
So, for example, if I'm going to make a big 4, I'd always rather make a McCall's one because I know they fit my body. Yeah. Whereas Vogue can get in the bin, really. Like, I can't, it doesn't work for me. Like, using Sarah's advice, it might now work for me.
So if you're going to commit to a big 4, commit to one brand to start with.
Exactly. Yeah. But even then, remember the instructions will tell you a third of what you need to know, and they will be utterly like, I don't look at the instructions when
there's so much, and I know we've said it before, so much assumed knowledge, like, and put the invisible zip in the way you usually do.
Yes.
Like, hang on a minute, I've never put an invisible zip in. I don't have a usual way. So I think that goes back to like, go to an indie pattern.
Yeah. Indie pattern instructions are fantastic and they put so much effort into them. Like, they're really impressive. But just that caveat that it's worth trying a few different ones to find a block you like.
Definitely, yeah, because there's a lot of different indie patterns. So when we're talking about indie patterns, if you're not sure what we mean, obviously Sarah's My Handmade Wardrobe is an indie pattern. We mentioned Closet Core. We've got Friday Pattern Company, which I mentioned earlier. We've got True Bias, Helen's Closet.
Yes. Tilly and the Buttons.
Would we class Pattern Emporium? Is it indie?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. I think it's indie enough.
Yeah. So that, look out for the ones where you can see the person behind the design of the pattern. That's really helpful, because a lot of them will have Instagram accounts, etc., where you can actually see the person talking about the patterns. Oh, Notches. That's a really great pattern.
Cashmerette. Yeah, I worked with Cashmerette. Love them. Particularly shout out for Cashmerette. If you are smaller and have big boobs, or if you are straight into plus size, because Jenny from Cashmerette actually knows how to draft for a curvy body.
Brilliant.
And she's written 2 really good books on it as well. Like, I cannot recommend.
Oh yes, she's got Sewing the Curve. That's just come out,
Sewing the Curve, and there's another one that I think is Ahead of the Curve or something. Yeah, that came out a couple of years ago. But I was an ambassador for Cashmerette Club for a while.
And we haven't mentioned Size Me Sewing.
Oh my God, of course, Size Me Sewing. So if you don't know Donna from Size Me Sewing, absolutely fantastic. I have pattern tested for her for years. But Donna is also doing a new
Tammy Handmade.
Yes. Oh my God, I'm forgetting all of my friends, guys. This is awful.
We'll put a load of these in the show.
Charlie Dennett as well. She's got new patterns coming out.
We will put a load of these in the show notes. Sorry if we miss you out. If you are an indie pattern company and you're listening and you're going, you've left us out, tell us. We'll put you in the show notes. We'll also mention you in another. Also, particularly if you're a friend of mine and I forgot you made patterns, I'm really sorry. But what I would say is so many of them, the instructions are super step by step. And also they do a lot of sew-alongs, and they have real people do the pattern testing. So like Jess, when she's talking about pattern testing, a lot of these companies will put a call out in places like Facebook and Instagram saying apply if you want to test our pattern. So they're actually asking real people to really sew it before they release it. I mean, I'm testing for Tammy Handmade at the moment, which makes it even worse that I forgot. I'm sure she will forgive you. I'm sure she will. But the great thing is that means that Tammy has designed something and she's not then released it. She's then given it to real sewists and gone, how do my instructions work? How does this fit on your body? And then she'll make her final amendments before releasing it. Obviously, as we've talked about, there's no one perfect fit, but the instructions, and I know because I've heard Jess talking about it, how much she looks carefully at every step, and if it doesn't make sense, she'll let them know. So
I'm simultaneously the best and worst person to review instructions. My PhD brain comes out and I'm like, should that be a comma? But we do that so that you guys can pick it up and sew it immediately.
And also, most of the indie pattern companies, they will have a whole A4 sheet telling you what the finished measurements are, not just what the garment are.
While we're on finished measurements,
top
tip from us, because it took me several years to find this out and much screaming. On the big 4 patterns, the finished measurements, for some reason, are on the pattern pieces themselves, nowhere near the rest of the measurements.
Yeah, so you've got to unfold every piece of the pattern to find it. And then you've got to play that horrific game of folding it all back up afterwards.
And then you find out you've cut over the measurements, so you don't know half of them.
And sometimes then they're not even there.
Yes.
It is a bit of a hit and miss.
Yes.
So do remember, for new people out there as well, that when you read the measurement that they're telling you is the size to cut, that doesn't mean that's the finished size. And that's the great thing about indie pattern companies. Like I was saying earlier in the episode, like Closet Core, they're telling you what the rise is and all. Because
Maison Fauve are fantastic for this,
one,
because I made the Hussard jeans, which I'm going to make another pair. I absolutely love them. But the measurements for that is your waist, your top hip, your full hip, 3 inches of your thigh, 10 inches of your thigh, which is an absolute pain to do, but they're the best fitting pair of trousers. I didn't have to make any adjustments because it meant I could actually pick the size.
And grading between the sizes, that's the thing, that it's so empowering when, like I was saying, like I'm not saying Vicky Sews aren't great patterns, but I want to be able to grade
between multiple sizes.
And if you're, like my calves are bigger, so I'd need to grade out there. So remember, you're finding what fits you, not what they tell you should be in.
Exactly.
And I think big 4 make that so much harder to find. That doesn't mean they don't have interesting patterns. They make it harder to find those things.
The flip side, though, I would say, and this is something I've noticed recently, big 4 patterns putting markings on pattern pieces.
Yes.
And this is something, if you're an indie pattern company listening, I would love it if you would start doing this. Please put bust apexes on patterns.
And if, like as Sarah's saying, that you've got to start and measure down from the shoulder, how can you measure to the bust apex if they haven't told you where they plan it to be?
Yeah, because you can measure your own, but you look at the pattern piece, at least on a big 4, and I have to give them this. The markings are there, the shorten and lengthen lines are there. All that
and
kind of stuff.
Some indie patterns are really good at the shorten and lengthen lines, others are not. So some offer you much wider variation of like a pattern. So for example, like the Friday Pattern Company patina blouse, giving you 2 lengths of cut for the blouse. Because if you measured, and like myself, I know that my bust sits higher, which is why when I buy things in shops, they're always too low. But that means I could choose the higher version on, that sort of thing.
The other thing as well, I'm just getting it all out today. If pattern companies are listening, I would like you to add a measurement to your chart. I would really like you to start adding the high bust you have drafted it for, because for me, I'm a 31 high bust and a 36 bust. If I know it has been drafted for a 31 high bust and like a 34 bust, I will do a full bust adjustment.
So some companies though you can get 2 versions of the pattern, can't you? So for example, I know with the Friday Pattern Westcliff dress, there's a B cup
and a D cup.
CD cup, and I'm trying to remember who makes the floor dress. I'll have to look it up. You buy a different bust size as well,
which is brilliant. And I love that. Cashmere do actual bra, like normal, not dressmakers cup sizes. They do normal cup sizes. So fully recommend that. But yes, if you are a beginner, our top tips are indies are better for instructions. If you are going to do a big 4, don't beat yourself up if it doesn't go right first time. Don't beat yourself up if you don't understand the instructions, because I trust you, no one else does either.
Bella loves patterns.
Bella loves patterns, yes.
Yeah. So I think now with Max lyrical about that, we should get on to the dilemma. So what have you got for us today, Jess?
Right, we are going to do a speedy dilemma today. Although lots of you love the longer episodes, so
but
hopefully
we have
still
heard
like
your feedback about liking some mini episodes.
Yes,
so we've listened.
We're working on it. We're working on it. So lots of you after Yvette's episode have been saying that you also hate it when people think it's their right to ask you to make them stuff.
Yeah.
So we refer you to the episode with Yvette. Give it a listen.
And if you've heard the first bit, do hang in to the last 20 minutes, because there's a whole 20 minutes about how to turn people down.
Okay, so we have got, don't you think it's annoying when pattern companies offer jackets when they are unlined, and then they make you pay either for the lining separately or don't produce a lining? So this person has said specifically, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing enough to line it, but it also feels like the jacket's too thin without lining. So that's their dilemma, I guess. There is, do they line it or have a go and possibly ruin something if they don't know how to line it? Or, well, I have a top tip for this person actually, because I lined a jacket recently that wasn't lined. If it has facings, then you're fine. Because what you can do is cut the same pieces out of the fabric, out of your lining fabric as you have as your main fabric, trim a little off so that they fit just inside the facing line with a seam allowance, and then you have a lining. So linings aren't too difficult.
So I think Friday Pattern Company do a tutorial on how to add a lining.
They do for the Ilford. Now, I know this came about because of a certain pattern release from Tilling the Buttons.
I was going to say there are several companies that make you pay extra for add-ons.
Yes.
Now, I don't know how I feel about it, because in one way I feel, well, I've paid you for the pattern, surely you owe me the
especially
pattern.
if you've paid like 17, 20 quid for a pattern.
But then at the other time, I recognise that these are small businesses who are paying in the UK, paying people wages in the UK, who I want to support. So I find it quite conflicting.
It is difficult.
Yeah.
Now,
but if you're just paying for one pattern and you're not going to get the extras, it does feel, particularly when I was just talking about Notches. I don't know if you've seen their patterns, but I think they're a company based in the Netherlands.
Some of
when you buy one of the patterns, you are getting about 20 different variations, including all the pieces to make those variations.
Right. Okay.
So it's hard. Pattern designing is incredibly time consuming, and I haven't even tried yet, but I'm looking at people who do it and respecting the work that they do. But I do think that with a jacket, to not get a lining.
This for me is where the line is. If you are creating an add-on that substantially changes the original garment, crack on, charge for it, fine. Do I approve of making you pay for an add-on when it's realistically just lengthening a skirt? No, and that makes me actively angry. Or you're adding a tier to something. It's just another rectangle that
so where does a lining fall in that for
so for me, a lining is part of the garment. It's a jacket. There should be an option for a lining. Now, even if that is, if you would like to line it, here is an extra line on the pattern piece that you can trace. It doesn't have to be
separate. Here's a video to show you how to do it. We're not going to send you any more pieces. You're not going to have to how to do it. But here's a video.
For me, a jacket should, if it is a jacket that should be lined, like less of a cardigan, more of an actual jacket.
Where do denim type jackets fit in that though? Because that's one of the patterns, isn't it, that might provoke this?
I think it does, and I think with denim jackets, I would be of the opinion of an extra line on the pattern. I'd be in what Friday Pattern Company did with the Ilford. Now, what's interesting with the Ilford is they saw people weren't necessarily asking for a lining, but they saw people kept lining it on Instagram, and they went, "Oh, guys, this looks really cool. Here's a tutorial of how you can do it." They didn't re-release the pattern, but they recognised the need.
And I do think there is that relationship with your customers that I think it's really hard. And, you know, I don't know that there's a right answer to this, but I think that's where some companies stand out, is that relationship of saying, look, we appreciate that you've bought this pattern for 17 or whatever pound, so we don't mind giving you a few bits, like a few bonus help with it.
I think it depends on the price of the pattern as well.
I was thinking that, because if you're getting a freebie or it's really cheap, then that's different.
Yeah, or if it's like a £7 pattern, you kind of expect it to not be lined.
Yeah, I think it's like everything in life. If we get something cheap or free, we shouldn't expect the same quality as if we pay something expensive.
However,
but that's not always how the companies are viewing it, but that's kind of my expectation.
I wouldn't necessarily expect a dress to be, but then I think it's also about the type of garment. So I wouldn't expect a summer dress to come with a lining option.
No.
If you are selling me an evening dress pattern, I would absolutely expect that to come with a lining, and I'd be hacked off if it didn't.
Yeah.
Because once you're at that level of sewing, if there's, for example, a zip, you don't want a ragged inside in your zip.
No.
And that's something, the pattern, if they're skimping out on that, to me is not putting the I would rather pay a little bit more for a really thorough pattern that I get again, particularly with evening. You have to recognise what your customers are going to be spending, I think.
Yeah, I think so, because, you know, if you're buying a straightforward sort of pyjama trouser, you shouldn't pay as much because it hasn't taken as long to draft that, test it, build it up as if you're buying like a beautiful bias cut lined evening dress.
Well, exactly.
So we should expect a variable price point as well, and I think
we should expect a variable price point. And also, though, I think companies should respect the people buying.
Yes,
because if you are making an evening dress pattern, there is then an assumption someone's fabric for that's going to be around 20 quid a meter. They are investing both in buying your pattern and the fabric to get the finished product. So I think there is a level of sort of going, well, if I were to buy this in a shop, it would have a lining. So there should be a lining. If you're making a coat, it should always have a lining.
Yes.
Jackets are awkward, but I even just think putting a line in your instructions saying, if you want a line it, this is how you do it. I think it's the height of cheek to charge you for the lining.
Yes, because why would you have not given it in the first place?
Exactly. If it already exists, why isn't it in the pattern?
And that's what people feel, because if it's suddenly released not long afterwards, then it feels like people have been trapped into committing to something.
Exactly, because they go, well, I bought it assuming there was a lining, because in the photos it has a lining.
Does it? Oh,
or some photos that were shared, I believe it has a lining.
Okay. That is tricky for people,
this person. You are not wrong for feeling like that.
No.
I'd never say anyone's feelings are wrong.
No.
But you're not wrong for feeling the way you do. It is annoying. It is something that potentially isn't the best way to do it. And you can see that from how annoyed everyone else in the sewing community was.
And I was going to say that, you know, everyone, you know, your feelings are valid. And actually, if in an appropriate way you reach out to a pattern company, sometimes you might be surprised by the reaction.
That is also true.
But I would say, I wouldn't do it in a public way. I would be reaching out to them with an email or a direct message on Instagram just to say how I felt, and because they won't know if we don't tell them.
They're not telepathic.
Yeah,
no one is.
and so, you know, we're not using this podcast to try and make people change things.
Oh my goodness, no.
And actually, that's why I would say that, you know, we're giving advice, and my advice would be is if you get something and you're disappointed, give that person the chance to rectify it.
Yeah,
and they won't know if you don't tell them.
Exactly. And also it's
company.
It's okay to ask. It is okay to feel a little bit hacked off. Because the thing is that the change might be they advertise it more clearly.
Yes, exactly. And that, you know, we never underestimate the change that you might or could make by reaching out to a company and saying, actually, I just want you to know that this was a bit of a shock, or this was a bit of a disappointment, because it happened, didn't it, with a reaction to some photographs on that.
Yes, it did.
And actually, people reaching out were then able to help people to think differently. And I know that I was following someone who'd bought a pattern, and it was something like not made by grandmas or something like that.
Yes, this was the whole sew over 50 thing, wasn't it?
I
think they shared it maybe.
So, but the person went directly to them and emailed them.
Yes, they did.
Now, they then shared the response because it was actually a really heartfelt response.
I remember this. It was really good because the pattern company, I don't think, realised the impact of what they'd written.
They didn't realise. What they were trying to do was get a wider demographic to sew.
Exactly.
Because a bit like my stepdaughter who's 15, she rolls her eyes at the thought of what I do. And that's okay, you know. I feel like I failed a bit there, but that's, you know.
So I give her a couple of years.
Yeah. But we don't want the younger generation to feel that sewing is for everyone else. And I know you're sat there going, well, that's not true for me. But that's what they were trying to do.
It's absolutely.
But then they accidentally offended a different generation.
Well, I think as well, it's the message should be sewing is ageless.
Yes, and that might have been a better message.
I think so.
But they wouldn't have known they'd upset people unless, like, this person emailed them and said, do you realise this has made me feel X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think, you know, direct contact, and that's one of the great things about these small independent businesses. It's much easier to have direct contact with the people who are making the difference.
It is. Just remember, if you are messaging, my top tip when you're messaging anyone about anything you're annoyed about, write it out Don't write it in the message app, write it in your notes.
Yeah.
Put it down, go get a cup of tea, take a minute, come back, reread it.
Don't write it at 1 o'clock.
No, don't write it the next, or do, but review the next morning.
I've been on the receiving end of many a 1 o'clock email.
Oh,
I
my
wish
God.
that after a certain time at night, the email providers would pop up and say, "Are you sure you want to send this
like
now?"
the paperclip.
Yeah. Or would you like to read this again in the morning?
Your message has a surprising number of expletives and misspellings. Would you like to do it again tomorrow?
Or I'm sure in the cold light of day, you might change your phrasing.
Editing is now locked until you're sober, you know. I love it.
You know, when we are riled up, and we have a right to be riled up, you know, but we just want to take a breath. I'm known in my job as the person who can write the diplomatic email.
I get friends of mine to check mine.
Dear.
Because the thing is, I can be very diplomatic, but it's quite a lot of, like, I know my audience in terms of, like, I would always be very diplomatic with a client, but I always struggled with people in the same role as me. Or I'd be like, I used to really struggle when I was very busy and someone would come over and ask me an irrelevant question. And every bit of my brain wanted to be like, what possible reason do you have for bringing this? Are you okay? Are you not busy enough? But what I started doing was just going, we can pick this up tomorrow, and then going and standing in a fire escape and go, but you know, it's what you need. So for this person, if it's bothering you, reach out and ask about it. If you're just a bit annoyed, then it's something that, you know, you don't have to use the pattern either. You can destash it. It's fine. You can go fling it into outer darkness and
someone
never
else
look at
will
it
probably
again.
snap it up from you, you know, or you can
Just tell them it doesn't have a lining.
Or bring it to my swaps table.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, we've had a fabulous time this week, and we've recorded in person, which has been lovely. And I think we should do this more. It was good fun. So remember to follow us on Instagram at So What's New Pod, to rate and subscribe to the pod if you like it. The ratings make such a big difference in helping new people discover us.
And leaving comments and things. We love it.
We do. And
because
share us with
otherwise
Sewing Pals.
we're talking out into the ether. And when you leave comments, it helps us to know how you feel about it. And also, don't forget, in the show notes, there is a link to the Facebook page where you will find the detailed show notes, links to everything.
Yes. So also join the Facebook group. If you want to, please do.
All the deets are in there for anything. We have people asking about podcast recommendations. We're more than happy to respond, to offer other ideas. So in the details of the pod, you'll find the links that you need.
And if we forget, so if, like, one of the pod questions we got was about a podcast, I mentioned in passing a specific episode, and I suddenly went, oh yeah, I did do that, and then linked it. So if we miss anything, we're only human. Let us know. Just
ask us, we'll answer.
Fabulous. So until next time, thank you so much for listening. And we will see you next week for some So Yellow for Endo chat.
Oh yeah, no, not next week, the week after.
We'll
2
see
weeks time.
Yes, we will see you next time for some So Yellow for Endo chat. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye.